to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Well, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. My name is Tom Dutta, and we're live streaming on Facebook today and LinkedIn and YouTube. I'm excited in a moment to welcome our guest, Mr. Paul Edwards. You can see him on the screen here. Now, everybody, my podcast is called The Quiet Warrior Show, and we've taken it to another level by live streaming the interviews. This will be produced on a YouTube video and then released across an international podcast in the near future. And so stand by as I get ready to bring on our guest. Well, welcome, Paul Edwards. It's great to have you here, Paul. We've been talking for a while. Welcome to the show.
Tom, thanks for having me. So great to be here, and it's an honor and a privilege.
Yeah, it's all mine too, Paul. You know, I've done a lot of research, learned a lot about you, and what's really cool is that you're down in Olympia, Washington. I'm up here in British Columbia, Canada. I could throw a stone and maybe reach you, and the magic of technology. You know, Paul, this show's all about you. So one of the things I want to start off is asking you to tell us one thing about yourself, Paul, that you think a lot of people don't know.
Well, I'll say that I like to use this one at parties whenever there's a one of those games like Two Truths and a Lie. But in this case, this is all true. I actually have lived in 5 different countries, hold 3 different passports, and speak 2 languages.
Wow. Well, there you go. So change it up on the interview, will you? Start talking at me in a different language. I'll probably be freaking out over here. Let me tell people more about you. Everybody on the screen, and I know if you're listening to this later on the podcast, you won't see this, but on the screen is a stock ticker with Paul's website, the paulsedwards.com. You want to check him out there, his bio. Just very simply, he's an international best-selling author. His book that's coming out is notable. We'll talk about that. He's a ghostwriter, and I want to talk deep about that because I didn't really know what that was years ago. He's a host of his own podcast, Influencer Networking Secrets Podcast. And he's done many things, including tours of in the military. And so let's start, Paul, by turning it to you. There's something that happened in our research together. And I said, you know what, Paul, my show's about the hero's journey, dude. This is about putting your ego at the door and coming on. And we don't want to just hear about how great you are. Just tell us all the bad stuff too. And you sent me a blurb and there's one thing I read in it and it just stopped me. And I went, he's like me. And he said, I've become what I call a recovering egomaniac whose pride, arrogance, self-righteousness, greed, and lust have declined at breakthrough speed, drowned out by my grace of God. Man, take us back and start the story wherever you want.
Well, if you look to the ancient wisdom, it really is something that is born and brought up in us. But I would say that I actually hearken back to a time that was a very interesting time for this to happen because it coincided with me becoming a disciple of Jesus. I was right on the cusp of entering the kingdom of God, but I was also in a season where I still lacked a lot of maturity, as a worldly maturity, I guess you would say. And so even as I'm coming into the kingdom of God, I'm 22 years old. This is 2002. I made a decision to leave a company where I had been promoted 4 times in 7 months because I had made it all about serving and showing up and being reliable and responsible and doing all the right things. And they were just loving what I was doing. And I got into my head that, I deserve better than this. They should be promoting me faster. They should be making me a manager. They should be, right? You always encounter that convergence of where you choose either I'm here to serve or I'm here to be served.
Yeah.
Now, if you look to the Bible that I read, of course, we realize Jesus said, I came to serve, not to be served. But I made the opposite choice. And so followed about 20 years, nearly, of professional chaos. Personally, my life went along pretty steadily. Actually took a turn for the worse as I entered my 30s and left the military and all of the distraction that provides to keep you from dealing with these issues internally. But as I entered my 30s, I found myself suddenly without the excuse, or not an excuse, but the call of duty, right? This huge organization that you can't possibly withstand pulling you away from your life. And I found myself as a father, transitioning out of the military, which took me 5 years to get used to being a civilian, transitioning into being a full-time married man living at home with my wife, as well as a father of 2 young little boys. And I had got a degree, right? And I was living at a time where a college degree began to drop precipitously in terms of what it actually could have opened doors for you, right? We've seen that over the last 10 years. And so all of this led to me getting denied opportunities that I felt entitled to, and thus having to work a job that I really didn't want to do, which was selling insurance.
Yeah.
All throughout that, I find myself growing as an insurance salesperson, right? I'm smart enough to know nobody wants to talk about insurance, so I've got to figure out something else to talk about. And I settled on the topic of building relationships and marketing, right? Because every business owner that I talked to wanted to talk about those things. How do I do it? How do I do it better? And that's where the journey began. But for a long season, I was wrestling with depression and addiction and anger and bitterness and rage and hostility and self-righteousness, and I'm right and everybody else is wrong, and it's about damn time they listen to me. And Tom, if I could take back some of the things I've said and done, but all of it carries forward into a lesson that I can teach now to the younger men that I get to mentor, and to my sons and to anyone else who will listen, including your fine audience.
Yes, thank you. Well, listen, hit the pause button there, Paul. You've earned a break. I mean, man, my mind is going in so many directions. I should let you know my brain is 3-dimensional. I've been told that. So you're saying things, dude, and I'm going like over here and there, and I'm going like, look, it's like I call you brother. The thing is that your story is classic hero's journey, where we go through life and we hit a point where there's so much pain. We take a journey to discover the meaning of it, then we come back and teach or something. And I wrote a few notes here. I just want to catch the audience up on what I see. That there you are at 22 years old, young man. And I mean, when you say you were promoted 4 times in 7 months, I'm going like, wow. I mean, some people want to be promoted 1 time in a year, and that wasn't enough. And you started using words like self-righteous later, and I call that significance. And why I connect to your story is when I became a CEO at the age of 31, it's like talking to the mirror here, and I was getting promotions, and it wasn't enough. And there was something missing in my soul. And I was seen as arrogant and sensitive all about myself. And what's really interesting is I started asking myself why. And then when I did some self-work, here's what I discovered. It's in the book I wrote. The values of love and gratitude weren't even in my top 5. It was significance and things like money and all of that. And it was bizarre. And, when I talk to leaders, here's the thing, Paul, about your story that I want to honor, and a couple more things before I turn it back to you to go deeper. And that is, in the leadership world, a lot of leaders who show up incongruent to who they really are, who have trouble with relationships, who fall down, maybe get into addictions, things, they can't reveal the monsters that are inside. They can't talk about those things, and their lives are ruled by it. And yet here you've come full circle to be able to say, this is what my life was, and this is how it changed. And now let me teach you. I love that. The insurance piece is fun. Yeah, I don't want to talk about insurance. We have something in common. I've worked in the industry for about 8 years, Paul. I don't know if you knew that about me, about 8 years. And then I was asking myself about my story, trying to connect it to yours, is that, why did we get caught up? I think you used the words of addictions and anger and all that stuff. We aren't born that way, Paul. Our neurons are empty. It's emotions and thoughts are wired together in the first 10 or 12 years, as you know. Mine was, as you know, a militaristic alcoholic father in a violent home, and that ruled me. And I remember you wrote to me and you said you very nearly dragged your own kids down that road when you were transitioning out from being a combat veteran. And I'm like, I honor you for saying that, because I'm glad you didn't, because I got drugged down that road. Here's the thing. Tell me about what you think was the root of those addictions, those behaviors, before we get into the other side of it.
Well, again, to go to the ancient wisdom, there's all kinds of talk in there about idols, which, if you aren't busy fashioning a statue out of wood or gold and bowing down to it, you think irrelevant. Well, what the Bible's actually trying to get at there is things that we go to for a source of life and joy and replenishment and happiness. And, it's strange, Tom, because I never had a problem with certain ones, like alcohol, right? I have a low alcohol tolerance, and I'm not talking about how quickly I get drunk. I'm talking about an appetite for it. I hardly ever drink now, but when I did, one was all I could handle. After that, I felt stuffed, bloated, checked out, didn't want to bother with it. I never got hooked into tobacco the way some people do. I had a psychological need to be cool and accepted, but I was never, when I quit cold turkey in one day. I never got into drugs. I tried marijuana at a young age. Shouldn't have done it, but I was like, this isn't fun. I'm not enjoying this. I'm supposed to be having the high of my life. I feel like crap. So, people tend to think it vices, food. I'm like, I got to eat, but that's it. I've lost huge amounts of weight multiple times, and I'm a bodybuilder, and I'm like, I'm not going back to being overweight. I don't enjoy it. I don't like looking at myself when I am. Yeah. But I'm not, I could take it or leave it. People are like, I got to have cake. I got to have ice cream. I'm like, okay, well, if you say so. But God made this creature called Eve, and I am a recovering sex addict with, 2016 is when I stopped. So 4 years of sobriety, particularly from pornography and objectification, and just a totally hog wild, inappropriate way of looking at and thinking about the opposite sex.
Yeah.
And because she looks like a fountain of life, it's very easy to mistake her for one. Yeah. Because our culture is so shallow and vacuous and surface oriented. Everything's on the surface. That's why you talked about putting significance and money at the front instead of love and humility and honor and all of that kind of thing. And that's exactly what our culture socializes us to do. It doesn't want us thinking about deep things, because if we do, we won't fall for its lies.
Yes.
And so I just had this, and I was, I'm struggling with this. I'm in my mid to late 30s. I'm like, this is one thing when I was a teenager, but I'm supposed to be, I'm 36 years old, and I'm still acting like I'm in middle school. I can't stop myself from this. I'm just like, so we were on a vacation to Puerto Vallarta, and this must have been the 500,000th time I had tried to satiate this inner emptiness with sexual pleasure. And I said, okay, I remember that I joined the kingdom of God, and I don't know what it was I joined for, but I know it wasn't this. Yes. And I said, when I get back, I'm going to Sex Addicts Anonymous. And I told my wife, I said, I'm going to Sex Addicts Anonymous. I'm not living my life like this the rest of the time that I'm on this planet. That's not what I signed up for. Yeah. And I came back, I found a local group, and I went to it for probably about 6 months. That was all it took. And then other things in the kingdom of God began to come back to me. Prayer began to come back to me. Devotional time began to come back to me. I went to the following year in 2017, I went to Wild at Heart boot camp with John Eldridge and his team. And I have never looked back since then. August 20th, 2017 was a pivotal day in my life because I received a new name from God, and that has carried me forward right to this very second that we're talking.
Well, first of all, that's an amazing thing. I got to write that down. Remind me if I don't, the August 20th date. It might actually be a date or the week where we can release this amazing show. I got to tell you, my brain went so many places. And I'm going to honor you, Paul, because very few people will talk about those type of things. We could talk about alcohol, but with sex addiction. There was a movie I saw a few years ago. I think is the actors, Wahlberg. I think it was Wahlberg or Ruffalo, one of them. And it was about that topic. And here's the thing. I mean, when I grew up in my business career, when my first senior management job, I was in Toronto, Canada. And, we go out for drinks at night and the guys are taking us to a place called the Landing Strip. I mean, I'm this young guy and I thought it was just a bar. And guess what? And I'm going to reveal, I've never talked about this on my show before. I don't think I even wrote about it in my book. But here's the thing. I believe you come into the world and, you're nurtured by parents, or you're supposed to be, and you're taught. And like I said, the brain's empty of thoughts and emotions. Well, in my home, my father had pornographic tapes, little videotapes in a big machine. And I started seeing that stuff when I didn't even know what it was. And they say in the first 10, 12 years of your life, Paul, you know this because you're an expert in human behavior, that the prefrontal cortex part of the brain doesn't guide us. We don't get use of it till we're about 20. So the other brain basically believes everything it sees and it stores it. So I grew up seeing that stuff, but also my mentor, my dad, who turned out to be a demon. And then when he died in January 18, I fell in love with him again. But there's that. And then I found other things in the drawers and, their bedroom. And then here's the kicker. My uncle and my aunt, my mom and dad used to go down to Blaine, Washington. And I always remember they used to go to a place called the Seaview Theater, and they used to talk about something called blue movies. And so they would go down there and watch these, I guess, soft porn and have drinks. And, that was part of life. So I had an interest in magazines and things like most kids. And then I started learning too that, why are we doing these things? Well, for me, alcohol or whatever, it creates certain feelings in the brain to calm the monsters that are in us. Mine was the monsters of abuse from my childhood. And when you go into the business world, I'll finish with this. And I said this in my TED Talk, Paul, it's actually in the script, that we don't talk about things like, not being okay. And we use booze, drugs, porn, whatever we can find to cover it up. That I made that statement in my TED Talk, and everybody watches that, or everybody I talk to, they don't say, yeah, you're wrong. It is a fact of life. So how you can unravel it, I think, you're now a mentor and you teach so many things, but dude, you're a mentor and somebody that others who are afraid to say, I have things I need to deal with. I hope they find you, and God put you into this world to teach you something and to teach others with that. So bless you, man. Let's go further now into what you've done with all this. So I want to just jump to another interesting part of your profile, and that is the book that is coming out in September, I believe, is called Influencer Networking Secrets. And I just want to read something here. It says, in his forthcoming book, Influencer Networking Secrets, Paul outlines 5 qualities of the radically generous entrepreneur. I love it. Tell me about that.
Well, this, for a while it was, I was calling it a client avatar. I really want a client who is a radically generous entrepreneur. But over the evolution of my business, Tom, it's become an aspirational avatar for me. It's become something that I want to become. And I'm seeing examples. I meet people who example parts, or in some cases, most, if not all of it, all the time. And the way I know it is by observing their actions according to these 5 principles I've laid out. So, they are magnetic instead of pushy. And they are pro bono publicists. They care nothing whatsoever about, talk about, well, look how great I am, but they will go to bat for you, to put you on their show, to hawk you to anybody they know, to tell you, this guy, you need to meet him, right? They're persuasive in print. When you get an email from them or you get a letter from them, you want to read it. And whatever they say in it is valuable to you. They curate. They don't just hang out with anybody. And they don't just engineer any old result, particularly failure. They are more likely, they have a higher batting average with the right people and the right circumstances and the right situations. And they are huge believers that not for profit is for profit. Right.
Right.
It has all the accoutrements of being not for profit, but the reality is, I participate in good things. This is not the reason I do it, but good things happen when I participate in a not-for-profit exercise. So I'm looking at this. I'm watching people like this left and right. They come out of the woodwork, particularly when you are that type of person as well. And it just alters the playing field in ways that I could give you example after example, where I walk, these people have a gatekeeper and I walk right past them, and the gatekeeper doesn't even look up from their desk. They don't see me. Right.
Yeah.
They never see me coming because I come from the top down. The executive tells the gatekeeper, oh, you got to meet this friend of mine. And is it always directly financially profitable? No, most of it is indirect. Most of it is as a result of this expression I've coined, which is I do wonderful things for free and I send God the bill, right? I basically
I love it.
I act like he acted when he walked the earth. And then I say, okay, here's what I need to survive on. You make it happen. And he says, done. And
I got to jump in. I got to jump in and just honor that, because you and I were talking a bit before we got on here that I spend so much time giving away things, doing things for others. It's part of my recovery from, just coming from broken beginnings, and I've realized I have a lot to give, but I never worry about. Like, I'll do things without expectation of reciprocity, and people say, you're not being paid for that. Why? That's worth $1,000 or whatever. And so much has come back to me, Paul, including meeting you, for example, through some connections we have, that my life has grown tenfold. I really believe in what you said. Tell us about something. So the work you do, I talked about, Ghostwriter, and then there's your book. Tell us more about what you do. In particular, I wanted you to drill down on the word ghostwriter, and I'll start with a statement about that and a little story for you. I didn't really understand what a ghostwriter was, because it's a term that, I guess was out there. I just didn't hear as much until about 10 years ago. But I worked for a company as general manager. It was a privately held company, believe it or not, an insurance company, which is your background. And the 60 some odd year old owner decided to write a book. He was mentored to do it. And there was an employee in the company, and she just lost it and berated him and started telling everybody he didn't even write this book, because he didn't even write it. And then I had this epiphany, and I had to talk to her and straighten her out. I said, you know what? We're CEOs, we're executives, and many of us can't take what's in our head and turn it into something that is worthy of being published. So many of us, like I did with my book, is when I write, I record into a recorder, I make a transcript of it, and then I work with somebody who's got expertise to turn it into something that looks, not amateur. And then I started thinking about presidents' speeches and politicians and even movie stars. They have scripts, plays. The reality is the whole world of ghostwriting, writing content, in my view, is just simply turning somebody else's wisdom into something. And it's a gift, I think, that you have, because it's hard to do. So just talk about that and what you do, and more about the book as you want.
Well, what I found was that, just like you say, a lot of people in the C-suites, in public life, in politics, whatever, you see, the thing is, again, I go back to the way our culture tries to get us to think. These are living, breathing stories. They're not just people. And so I tell people, focus on the invisible, right? Well, how do you focus on what you can't see? Exactly, right? They have a lifetime of wisdom and stories and experiences and things. And in many cases, you and I have probably both, I know I have, they've forgotten that they had them, right? This stuff that happened 10 years ago, I have no clue that happened to me until somebody reminds me. And then, oh yeah, that's a great story, by the way. You got to hear this, right? And then you get an opportunity to tell the story. Well, all we're doing is we're taking that and putting it on paper. But you see, I think probably the reason people tend to reduce the value of this is because they think, oh, they're just paying somebody else to come up with the content. And then they're slapping their label on it and saying, oh yeah, that's me. Yeah. No. What we're doing is we're arranging it like a composer would arrange, or an arranger, better stated, would arrange a piece of music written originally by a composer, but they don't have the blocking, right? They don't have the strategic attack pattern so that it's compelling and page turning, and you don't slap the book down and say, boy, there's another 10 minutes of my life I can't get back, right? So you're employing all of these invisible skills, and that's why people don't like when they can't see what your skill is, right? They tend to poo-poo it. That's why they poo-poo a lot of CEOs, because they think CEOs just sit in the corner office and talk on the phone all day, right? Well, yes, they do, but the conversations they're having at the level they're having them at with the kind of people they're having them with produce an awful lot of revenue. That's why they get paid what they do. Yes,
absolutely. Let me just say something.
Anyway.
Let me just say something about that. It might be controversial, probably not to you, but so you know that's where I came from. I grew up the ranks fast. CEO was one of the roles I had. It was an international company, so I learned about America through that. And yeah, we sit in our corner offices, but here's the thing. There's a scorecard out there that most CEOs have. You can find it online. And there's two things. People ask me, what's the job of a CEO? And I say the two biggest things a CEO is responsible for is, one, creating culture in the company, and two, creating the strategy to achieve whatever that vision is that their team or their board wants. And the hardest thing, Paul, to create is culture. People can't even define it. There's different ways, but how do we operate? There's cultures of innovation, which means, people need to make mistakes so that they can learn and find innovative ways to do things. There's cultures of fear. There's cultures of love. And some businesses say we're a family. Well, what the hell does it mean? And the CEO, when he sneezes, the office catches cold. So he's on the phone and he's out in the community and he's doing things with all the people all the time that nobody else is doing, because he's carrying that message, and he's really a coach and a mentor. And last thing I'll say is, and this, but my definition of leadership is creating other leaders. So when you become a CEO, you're not micromanaging, you're creating other people. So thank you for sharing that, everybody. It's a teaching moment on the show. You heard from Paul about CEOs in the corner office. They're seen as sometimes not what they are, but they're more than that. One of the things about the ghostwriting, and I want to ask you the question about business owners or executive business leaders. I told somebody once, I said, the biggest asset you can have is a book. And when I was mentored, before my book was written, Paul, I didn't even think about writing it. I'd put it off. A guy I know in Holland, Michigan, John, he handed me his book and it said thought leader on it. And he said, you need to take this and read it, and you need to write a book. We're trying to teach business leaders now that the next generation's coming up, and I'd like your opinion on this, like my daughter who's 22. They don't want bosses, they want coaches and mentors. And the brain is wired for storytelling. So we want to teach the leaders of the future to tell stories and to write, and whether they're blogging or whether writing newsletters or online content to their business, the people in business. And I'll finish with this and then put it back to you on this, that I have a guy, he's a good friend of mine, but he's a CEO that I coach, and he grew up in another country, India, and his dad was a farmer. And I'd worked with him for years, Paul, and then something big happened. He has like 12 companies under his umbrella, and his writing was very cold and tactile, and yet his personality is much like mine, very emotion based. And I said to him, why don't you tell your story? So your dad was a farmer, and the thing about his dad is his dad always was concerned about the people will they get fed enough when they're working? The workers were the number one priority, and this family culture that evolved, and he grew this amazing business. And I said, you know what, so he came on my podcast and he told his story, and we put that out to the people in his company. And you know what? He'd been there for almost 10 years. Many of them who listened said, we've never heard that before. And they loved it. And he started infusing that. So I know I've thrown up again about this because I ramble a bit, but tell me about with what you do, how can we help leaders to start doing more with their stories? And you in the work you're doing as a ghostwriter, the communication piece is huge. If I'm a CEO, okay, let's play this game. I'm a CEO of my own company, and my brand, The Quiet Warrior, and I have many, many pieces to my platform. I'll be honest with you, Paul, I've outgrown it. I can't keep up with writing content. I curate stuff. And now you meet me and you say, Tom, I can do some things to help you from here. Tell me some nuggets about what you would do for me.
Sure. Well, I think I would, if it's not readily available, but even if it was, the first thing I would want to go to is what are your core values? Because those are going to form kind of the pillars from which you can distill into chapters, right? That's how my book is laid out, right? These are the 5 things that I really value, and they're also practical, applicable strategies. And so if you do these things with a sincere heart, not expecting anything in return, God will take note of that, and he will make sure you're paid well for it, right?
Yes.
So there's one of the things I would ask. And those are kind of like midway strategic points in each chapter, because what you don't want to do is just come at people with a bunch of bullets when you're writing a book, right? It's okay to use them sporadically here and there, but you don't want to put out an instruction manual, right? We are trying to connect through story, because story is the language of the human heart. Yes. You'll notice this. I don't need to tell you this, Tom, but maybe somebody in the audience needs to hear that when you reconnect with friends and family, what's the first thing you do? You sit down and tell stories, right? Oh, you're never going to believe what happened to me, right? Oh, what happened to your car, right? So we're telling stories all the time, and we are stories. We are living, breathing biographies, autobiographies, whatever you want to call it. So with that in mind, I'm going to say, okay, well, the other thing we want to do is we want to describe the evolution here, because we're positioning you as an authority, as a leader, as credibility, right? So we're going to say, but we're going to be authentic. We're not just going to spout, okay, here's the values and here's why you should do it. We're going to tell a story. We're going to say, back when I was younger and I didn't understand this, here's how I screwed it up, right? Just like I've done coming on your show. I've said, I was a walking disaster in a very short period of time ago, covered up, looking very normal on the outside. But I realized from all that I've got to be true and authentic and honest and open, or else I'm not going to get the kind of depth and relational quality that I want, that leads to the significance that I now get to see as my empire grows, right? I don't want to use the word empire, but it's the first thing that came to mind. Freudian slip, maybe. But anyway, so I'm looking at, okay, where have you come from? Where are you now?
Yeah.
Right? And where is that leading us? Past, present, future. Because again, you are a story, right? Yes. So you might just be a few weeks into practicing this new principle you've learned that has corrected your perspective or changed or matured it. But nevertheless, if you can't speak to experiences you've had since you learned that, we're going to say, okay, well, this is where I'm going with it. Right. And most of the time, the people that I would work with for that are quite a bit past it. They've solidified their core values. They understand, right? Yeah. These are the 5 to 10 things that are non-negotiable for me, have to happen, or else nothing else is going to move. Right. And you can tell stories on both sides of that to illustrate the way forward for the audience. And when you illustrate a way forward, you engage followers.
Yes. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And everybody, that's a teaching moment, storytelling. And, I'm going to recommend, Paul, that at the end, we'll shout out on how people can get a hold of you. But you need to have, I suggest that business leaders need to have on their strategic toolkit somebody who can help them tell their stories. And you need to connect to Paul. Now, the thing that I find a lot, Paul, in business is blind spots with leaders. I call them limitations through the personality science I do. But leaders who get stuck or have difficulty, the number one thing I come across is blind spots. They can't see the impact they're having on others. Using my science that I teach, which is about motives behind behavior. I have some numbers here. I'm just going to throw it out for context, that 25% of the population in leadership would fall into what I call the personality of red, which is the motive of power, getting things done. And they don't show vulnerability. They don't show emotion very easily. It's very hard. They're not bad people. They can be insensitive, arrogant, and misunderstood. And so we need to, we have,
I got to make sure I get my hand up and
yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, no, that's okay. I mean, my wife in the profile I use is all red, and we've had to navigate for 25 years our marriage just to understand how we communicate. But going back to that, a CEO stands up in front of a group of people or a leader of a business and says, "This is how great, this is our vision, and it's going to be great, and we're building the Eiffel Tower, and you need to do this and this." And like you said, and you nailed it, the pathway to change is through the heart, the emotion center, which makes us want to follow, to say, hey, I'm going to listen to him. And I think I said this once before, that the missing link in strategic planning and visioning is the emotion side. It's communication, and it's storytelling, getting to the heart. If you can tell the story, Mr. CEO or Mr. Leader, and connect the people in your audience, your employees listening to that, they go, there's something he just said, that's my story. You put them into that hero's journey, you got them for life, and they will follow you. And so I find that what you're teaching and what you're doing is very relevant. I just don't think enough people in leadership understand that. Even look at the highest presidents in the United States, when they have such powerful stories they can tell to be relatable, yet they're disliked. And so, So thank you. We're down to the close to the wrap up here. It's been just amazing. Probably want to have you back and talk more, but this book of yours that's coming out in September, again, Influencer Networking Secrets, and you outline 5 qualities of the radically generous entrepreneur. Everybody, I'm going to recommend that you start getting hold of Paul, get on the list for that book, get it early, read it if you can get access, write a review so it'll honor Paul's work, and I know that it's a referable book that should be on every leader's shelf. I want to do something now, which I do on all my shows, Paul, and that's honor you with some leadership words. And you've seen me turning my head, writing down here on my paper. And as you talk, I write these words down. And so I'm just going to honor you with 4 words that I've written. Number 1 is heart. Man, you are heart. There's no question. As a man who's gone through what you have, you speak with your heart, and it moves me. And number 2 is storyteller. I think it's a great moniker because you're telling stories, and that's why I'm still here talking to you. Humility, after what you told us at the beginning of the show, blew my mind, man. But you're real, you're relatable. I would follow you into battle because you shared your innermost secrets. And then guess what you did? You had me tell my secret about something that happened in my home related to that. And I've never done that live streaming before. So thank you. And then the last one is teacher. I saw I'm a fan of TED Talks, as you know, and I saw one about being a first follower. And they say in your company, if you're the leader, find the first follower, the person you're going to influence. And so I thought about you, and wait a minute, I'm your first follower on this podcast, and you're the teacher, you're teaching me. And so what a gift to the world. I want to induct you now into the Quiet Warrior tribe. And so I'm going to ramble for another minute here. You see that image behind me on the screen there?
Yes.
All right. Well, everybody, you can't see this if you're listening to the podcast, but it is the challenge coin from my show. So when I started this, I wanted to bring leaders from around the world who would open up and share their authentic stories, not just how great they are, and teach us. And I thought, well, I'll develop an award and I'll induct the guests into the tribe. So this is a coin. Challenge coins originated in World War II. You're probably familiar with the concept, being from the military experience. And if you didn't carry yours, maybe you bought the other guys a drink and you had some fun with it. Today, they're used around the world to build community. Even AA, where my dad spent 22 years before he passed, they use this first responders. So it's handcrafted and minted in the United States. Sorry, Canada. In the front of it is a show art from the show, and it's raised. It's kind of raised lettering. The back of it is actually the hero's journey narrative, the crest, which I have tattooed on my left arm, by the way, which is behind the show itself. So we're going to get that to you, and I'm going to welcome you in, and just know that the warriors carrying this around the world, Paul, commit to me and through the show to take action, live their purpose, and keep doing what they're doing, helping other people. So welcome to the Quiet Warrior Tribe.
I'm deeply honored to be a part of it, Tom, and to be a part of your show and get the chance to tell my story to your audience, viewers and listeners has been a huge privilege.
Well, thank you. And so what about to you for the last word? Tell us where people can get a hold of you and your book and all those things.
Well, for everybody who wants it, we are in September. We're going to do a little, what they call a free plus shipping offer. So if you would like a free copy of Influencer Networking Secrets, you can go to my website, thepaulsedwards.com /influencer networking secrets. And as a matter of fact, what I should do, Tom, is I should create a special URL for your show as well for the show notes. So maybe I should walk that back and say, go to thepaulsedwards.com /quiet warrior. And I'll have that page over to you shortly, and we'll make sure that way we know how many fellow quiet warriors have come and joined. And in September, when the book becomes available, we'll get in contact with them and find out where we can send their free copy.
That's fantastic, everybody. Well, listen back to this just to get those details. But thank you for that, Paul. That's a gift. And I'll look forward to my own signed copy of that book. And I'll commit to doing a review for you for sure. So everybody, find the podcast once it's released on your favorite podcast channel and give it a like to honor Paul's story and live that life that you deserve and desire with a lot of passion, like you're hearing from Paul Edwards. And Paul, thank you for being on the show. We'll have you back again.
Would love to come back, Tom. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca